It's been 1 year since 22-year-old Mahsa Amini died while in custody of the morality police in Iran after allegedly showing too much hair beneath her hijab. Her death unleashed nationwide, even global protests against the Islamic regime. Since then, over 20,000 people have been arrested, over 500 have been killed, and at least seven people have been executed. Nazanin Boniadi is an Iranian-born human rights activist, actress, and 2023 Sydney Peace Laureate. Thank you so much, Nazanin, for talking with us on this sad anniversary. Can you believe it's been a year?
Katie, it's good to be with you. I wish it was under better circumstances. If you would have asked me a year ago when I spoke to you last, do you think we would be in exactly the same situation a year later? I would have said no, because I genuinely thought that conditions would change. But we've had a brutal crackdown. The regime has killed over 500 protesters, imprisoned more than 20,000 protesters, executed at least seven, gassed, blinded, raped, tortured, forcibly disappeared Iranians. And here we are again, back at the negotiating table with the Islamic Republic, about to unfreeze $6 billion in their assets, and exchange innocent hostages for convicted criminals. So I think what gives me hope is that the fight of the Iranian people, we're not seeing the same numbers on the street, but that resilience and the tenacity is very much alive in their psyches and their hearts and their minds. And I speak to them every day. And what they're telling us is, it's up to you what you want to do, international community. We are going to rise up again. We don't know when that's going to be. They're regrouping. They're trying to find a way to overcome this regime and really attain democracy. But are we going to be on the right side of this? That's the question.
When you say we, do you mean the United States of America?
US, the West, any country that has any sort of leverage on Iran, and on the Islamic Republic, I should say, because honestly, what we're seeing is not the Islamic Republic of Iran. We're seeing the Islamic Republic versus Iran. It's an occupying regime it's essentially occupying a decades-long theocracy that's occupying a multi-millennial civilization. And Iranians, the youth today, there's been such a resurgence of nationalism. And this nationalism is at odds with everything the Islamic Republic stands for. Keep in mind, Mahsa Amini was 22, a woman, Kurdish, Sunni, meaning she was a member of religious and ethnic minority groups. She was the antithesis of the geriatric male Shia clerics, intolerant clerics of the ruling elite in Iran. And that really, I think what it did was galvanize Iranian society at large to understand that women's rights really are human rights, and what they're trying to achieve as far as a free, democratic, secular Iran cannot be achieved without supporting the women and girls of Iran.
And in fact, her death triggered Iran's longest anti-government protests since the 1979 revolution. But was any progress made? I mean, what is the status of this woman life freedom movement?
You make a great point, Katie. There are hundreds of thousands of Iranian women in major cities across Iran right now, as we speak, walking around without the compulsory hijab. Keep in mind, it's still the compulsory hijab. The law hasn't changed, but they're defying the regime. There is a courage inside the country that is contagious. This is more than just a hashtag. It's not just woman life freedom. This battle cry, really, I mean, they're living it, they're breathing it. They're demanding women's rights. They want a normal life, and they want their fundamental freedoms. So again, it's really gone beyond draconian dress codes. It's beyond just women's rights at this point. It has become a national uprising against the Islamic Republic. And so what I hope is that the international community understands, A, the compulsory hijab is not part of Iran's culture. For the entire time I've been an activist, I'd speak to well-meaning progressives who would say, we don't want to talk about the hijab because, it seems like we just don't want to insult, or we don't want to, that's their culture. We want to be mindful of that. I hope that what's happened in the past year has thoroughly debunked the idea that is part of Iran's culture. No cultural norm should be enforced through threat of death or violence or even killing someone. So I think our minds, we've probably shifted the way we perceive Iran. That's shifted, and what's happening inside the country. I think Iranian society will never be the same again. The question is, I know this is the twilight of the regime. The question is, how long will it take for it to end, for democracy to prevail? And really, I think the onus is on us, the international community, to tip that balance of power in favor of the protesters.
But what do you make of the brutal reaction by the Iranian regime to these protests? As you said, the numbers are horrifying. The number of people who have been imprisoned, who have died, who have been executed. We've read about young women in schools being poisoned. How successful have they been at actually quashing this revolution by women in your country?
I mean, it's shocking, but not surprising. They've set a precedent for this. We've had uprisings in Iran nearly once every decade since the inception of the regime, the 1999 student protest, 2009 Green Movement, the 2019 bloody November protests in which 1,500 protesters were killed. And then 2017, late 2017, we started to have the anti-compulsory hijab movement. The Girls of Revolution Street started. Smaller scale, but again, that courage was contagious. 2018, we had protests, and again, as I mentioned, 2019 was Bloody November. The only thing that stopped the Iranian people from rising up was the pandemic. So essentially from 2019, the next time we saw them rise was 2022, and they're not going to stop. Everything is telling us that there's going to be another uprising. And what I mean by that is you still see the courage, the displays of courage, not only hundreds of thousands of women unveiled in major streets, in major cities of Iran on the streets, but you have athletes, female athletes, who are still competing without the compulsory hijab. You have very prominent actresses inside Iran, like Taraneh Ali Dousti, Katayoun Riahi, Hengam Ghaziani, who are very outwardly opposed to the compulsory hijab, take pictures without the hijab and post it to social media, or do interviews without the hijab with foreign media. I mean, they risk their lives and their livelihoods by doing so. You have musicians writing anthems against the regime and in support of the protesters. All of them get imprisoned. Mehdi Yarahi is a singer who just wrote a new song supporting the women of Iran and is now in prison. You have brave dissidents who are being jailed, and then they come out. Young female journalists, Nazila Maroufian and Sepide Gholian, both of them, every time they come out, they'll take off their hijab, they'll say a slogan against the regime, throw up a peace sign, put the picture out there in the world, knowing full well they'll go back into prison. That is the type of courage that you can break one person, you can break two people, but as their slogans, their street protest slogans said, for every one person killed, 1,000 will rise up behind them.
You mentioned that we're witnessing the final gasp, in your view, of this regime. What will it take for Iran to become the democratic country it once was?
That's a great question. I wish we had sort of a magic pill for this all to be fixed, but it's a long game, and we all know that. But here are the things we can do. One of the number one tools of repression they have is internet blackouts. So we have to, I think it's incumbent upon us, it's a moral responsibility that we have to ensure that they have internet access. Whether it's through providing VPNs, or Starlink was an option at one point, but we can't react to these things anymore. We have to be prepared so that the next time there is a mass uprising, we can provide internet access or ensure that there isn't a blackout for the Iranian people. And then the other side of it is autocracies are so good at banding together. Democracies are not. And what we're seeing is China and Russia providing surveillance equipment and also capabilities so that the Iranian regime can surveil and crack down on dissidents and on women defying the compulsory hijab. Another thing is that basically what we're seeing inside Iran is that these women are, they rise, basically the propaganda that we're seeing from Russia and China, they spend billions of dollars on. And we, on Radio Free Europe or Voice of America, it's in the tens of millions. So the propaganda that they have, the machine, is so much stronger than these dissident voices. It doesn't help, frankly, that when President Raisi is in New York, that he's being hosted by groups outside of the UN. I don't think he should be platformed. And we have an obligation, I think, of not platforming regime officials. That's why I'm so grateful to you, Katie, for giving voice to the protesters. And this is really our responsibility: platform and empower the people of Iran, disempower, deplatform the regime.
How worried are you, Nazanin, that people are going to forget what's happening in Iran? Things explode in the news and then they recede and people move on. How concerned are you about that?
I'm very concerned because for 15 years I've been advocating for the Iranian people, and sadly it comes and goes in cycles. And there was a lot of attention after 2009 and that viral video of Nada Sultan on the ground with blood gushing out of her mouth and her nose as her eyes rolled back. It was the most watched death in human history. And nothing changed. And then you had more protests and they got cracked down and nothing changed. I was really hoping this time would be different. There have been things that have been unprecedented, like the landmark UN fact-finding mission, the Islamic Republic getting ousted from the UN Commission on the Status of Women, which they should have never been on. But then we took 10 steps back again. And here we are in the same position as we were before these protests, back at the negotiating table. I think we have to think long and hard about our strategy towards the Islamic Republic, because we haven't cracked it. Whichever administration, whoever's been in power, hasn't solved it. And it's really time that we invest in democracies coming together, empowering democracy, including at home, and not taking this lightly. I think the fight really here is against authoritarianism.
On September 12th, the House of Representatives passed a series of bipartisan measures targeting Iran over human rights violations and missile and drone production. Was that a positive development in your view?
I think anything that stops or puts a stop to their nefarious actions is a positive step. I will say sanctions are useless unless they're enforced. So, we can adopt however many bills and make them law and put sanctions everywhere, but those sanctions really have to be enforced. And they aren't universally, enforced the way we want them to be. They find very creative ways, meaning the regime finds very creative ways of circumventing or finding ways to still have a cash flow with their oil revenues. So I just think these bills are great, but I think we need to do more, and they have to be more strategically targeted at empowering civil society inside Iran.
Are you optimistic the U.S. government is focused on this enough? What would you say to President Biden if you had a chance to speak to him on the 1-year anniversary?
I mean, I met with the administration early on. I think it was October last year, and they told me that there's no way they would negotiate with the regime as these protests are going on in particular. And I would say the reason the protests are not going on isn't because the people have stopped protesting. It's because they've been forced into submission, forced into jail, killed, threatened. And understanding that and understanding the pain of the Iranian people and understanding that really their plight and that the success of what they're trying to attain is in our benefit, is to our benefit. So we have to, I think that's why we're missing the point here. A free and democratic and secular Iran hopefully will not be one that is a nuclear threat to the world. And if that's what millions of Iranians are striving for, surely the greatest tool we have, the greatest asset we have is their courage. And how do we tell them that their courage is seen and heard and that we're with them without just words? I mean, words are empty at this point. But you're right, Katie. There's been sort of a wake-up call for me that at the end of the day, what we have to do is really band together as dissidents and trying to find a bigger solution than just relying on one or two governments.
You say that words aren't enough. So how can people support the women and young people who are fighting for change in Iran?
As simple and trivial as it may seem, amplification, whether it's on social media, writing articles, or if you're a journalist, then doing exactly what you're doing is hugely important. Taking away platforms of, if you see somebody who has been implicated in any kind of crime against humanity in Iran, make sure they're deplatformed in the West. They have no right to be living in a free democratic country when they have been responsible for the oppression of the Iranian people. We, as citizens in Western countries, have a vote and we have a voice. And those are the two things we can use. So make sure we're electing people who are not short-sighted on these topics and these subjects and these issues. And really, I think, talk to Iranian people, amplify the voices of Iranian dissidents, and don't turn a blind eye. That's really all it takes.
The UN General Assembly will be convening in New York. Do you see any role for the United Nations in all this?
Yes, I think the United Nations, while I understand there are authoritarian states that have seats at tables that make decisions ultimately, some of the decisions made after ousting the Islamic Republic out of the Commission on the Status of Women have been appalling. The Islamic Republic, with its vice president of the General Assembly, they have risen to positions in the UN that they shouldn't be occupying. And that's all of this after they were ousted from the CSW. So it makes no sense that countries came together, member states came together to take one proactive action in favor of the Iranian people and then completely forgot. It's almost as if the rest of the decisions after that have just been, empowering the regime. So I think that at this point, I think every country that is voting in their favor obviously has their own interests in mind. But I think that the resounding message here should be that a free and democratic Iran is good for justice and democracy across the world. And really what it comes down to is authoritarian states, Russia, China, Iran, Venezuela, they're so good at banding together and fighting for their common objectives. And democracies have really failed on that front. And that is hugely reflected in the United Nations.
There have been reports this week that the U.S. has advanced a deal with Iran that would free up $6 billion in frozen Iranian assets in exchange for the release of 5 American citizens detained in Iran. What are your thoughts on this development?
My understanding is that these frozen assets are in a foreign bank account, and the money belongs to the Islamic Republic, but they've been frozen for a reason because of the nuclear issue and other sanctions placed on Iran, rightfully so. And so with this deal, that money would be transferred to Qatar, a bank account in Qatar. And the Islamic Republic would now have access to that money. Now, I think the stipulation by the US government was that it should only be used for humanitarian means. And the Islamic Republic has come back and said, we will use it for whatever we want, whenever we want. And they've also made it very clear that they will not stop taking Americans hostage. The foreign Islamic Republic foreign minister said that. So the Iranian people have every right to be disappointed, hurt, angry by what's happening, what they're seeing. This isn't just a prisoner swap. I mean, we're talking about hostages, innocent American hostages being released for criminals, people who, you know, that we have due process in America. There is no due process in Iran. And so I desperately want, and I know even the families of the people, the hostages who are left behind and are not part of this deal, I know they also want these hostages to come home. I desperately want them to come home, but at what cost? And surely we can find a way to strike a deal that doesn't essentially give the regime access to funds that will basically allow them to pursue more oppression of their own people, export of terror, and maybe even furthering their nuclear program.
What impact do you think it will have on the goals of the protesters? Is it a distraction, or is it something that will hurt them even more?
You know, what should be in the headlines right now, is very much the 1-year anniversary. And this has become sort of the main news headline when it comes to Iran right now. We have to find a better way to do this. We cannot keep incentivizing hostage diplomacy. The Islamic Republic will continue down the same path. We're not deterring them with this action. And some people will say, well, let these hostages come home and then we'll figure it out. But we've been saying that for 44 years. Let these hostages come home and then we'll figure it out. Even I've said something similar in the past. Let's just get these people home, because I desperately want them to come home. I want them to be reunited with their families. But there are essentially 80 million Iranians taken hostage by this regime right now. And that's what we really have to face, is people are dying. 9-year-old Kian Pirfalak was murdered by this regime in a car, sprayed with bullets by security forces in the middle of these protests. Countless children, women, men, young Iranians are dying for freedom. Let's not keep emboldening and incentivizing the oppression that the Islamic Republic is unleashing on its own people and people outside Iran.
It must be so frustrating and exhausting, Nazanin. How do you keep going and fighting for what you believe in?
Katie, when I talk to young women and men in Iran, I just think, who am I to be tired or not have the hope that things could change? Because they are filled with hope and fire. That revolutionary fire is very much alive in their hearts. And when I talk to them, I'm ashamed to say I don't have the same tenacity that they do. I can only learn from and be inspired by their courage, and it keeps me going. So every time I call them and I think, have we failed you? They keep finding solutions. They keep saying, look, here's the way forward. They're not being defeatist about it. So how can I possibly feel defeated if they don't, and they keep going? And when I see their courage, honestly, Katie, this is not the end. The people of Iran will rise again. And I'm going to get emotional, but I just want people to know that the next time we owe it to them to be prepared the next time.